guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow and I am back with an all new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read into Tulsi Gabbard. So love her or hate her, you are going to come to learn a lot more about her on an energetic level. And if you've been wondering why she has switched sides from the left to the right, we will be discussing that as well. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, before we dive in, I'm first going to share with you guys that if you have ever wanted to book a session with me, there is no better time than the present, because I have recently launched an Etsy shop, and all of the readings include a personalized energetic report that you get to keep. So whereas in the past, all of my sessions were done on the phone and you had to take your own notes, now after I conduct the energy assessment into you, I will type up all of those notes and send it directly to you. And all of the sessions in my shop are brand spanking new, never before seen the light of day on my website. So I've basically taken the most common questions asked to me in my signature Behind the Veil energy read, and I have broken them up into more affordable and personalized options. So if you would like to check out my Etsy shop or my website, there is a link in the description box down below. Now let's dive into some three-dimensional information on Tulsi Gabbard. Now the reason that I include this is not to build out a full character profile into who a person is, because ostensibly, if you've clicked on this video, you have an idea who Tulsi Gabbard is. It's more to bring forth any information that perhaps one may not know about people on the public sphere or on the world stage. Now, I also do not share the full page or basically copy everything that's written, because certainly anyone that's like a public has a public profile, I can speak, I promise, or somebody that's a politician or an actor or an actress, they tend to have rather lengthy Wikipedia pages. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think anybody is here basically just to hear me parrot what is written about somebody. So I really just will share with you what is written in the first paragraph of somebody's Wikipedia page. So if we don't really know who they are, it's just to give you a little bit more of a taste of who they are actually in the three-dimensional world, or basically who their avatar is in this lifetime. So here we go. Pretty much the top paragraph written about Tulsi Gabbard. So if you're like, Faye, you missed a bunch of things, I'm well aware about that fact, and that's why I'd give this whole long aside to you in advance. So Tulsi Gabbard, born on April 12th, 1981, is an American politician, U.S. Army Reserves officer, and political commentator. She served as a U.S. representative for Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District from 2013 until 2021. She became the first Samoan American voting member of Congress. Now, if you don't know what a Samoan American is, because I certainly didn't, I actually did look this up. And the reference to a Samoan American is a Pacific Islander that does not live on mainland United States. So for example, people that live on any of the Hawaiian Islands would be considered Pacific Islanders. They are actually citizens of the United States, but they don't live on mainland US soil. So a Samoan is a Pacific Islander, which comprises the second largest group after Hawaiians. So Tulsi Gabbard is a Samoan American, and she was a Samoan American voting member of Congress. She then later went to become a member of the Democratic Party, and in 2020, she ran as a Democrat in the presidential election. She did later go on to leave the Democratic Party, and in 2022, she became an independent, and now more aligns herself with conservatives and conservative values, and has now also been on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. She has an estimated net worth of $30 million. And now this frankly blew me away. I was like, wait, what now? Because I think arguably we could all make the case. We've learned a lot over the last few years, have we not? And maybe one of the things that we have come to learn is, maybe just one of those things, is how completely corrupt politicians are, and certainly how corrupt lifetime politicians are. So I saw that she has an estimated net worth of $30 million, and I was like, whoa. Does this mean that Tulsi Gabbard is a corrupt politician? Now, I'm not going to decide that for you. I'm just going to share the information of what I had come to understand once I had dug into what is comprising the majority of her wealth, which is first and foremost, she inherited nearly $6 million. Then on top of that, she has earned $1 million in royalties from her books, as well as book sales. She has made real estate investments, as well as savvy financial investments. And there is also her personal earned income, which includes over $1 million as being a special political commentator to networks such as Fox News. Now, I'm not here to convince you anything in either way. That's why I said at the top, like, love her or hate her, like, you do you, boo. This is just me sharing with you that when I saw $30 million, I was suspicious, and I was like, wow. So I felt it was my obligation, first and foremost, to myself, because we can all do the same research I did. But I felt to myself, for me to come to some sort of a conclusion about her, I wanted to know where her $30 million came from. Like, was this because of, like, she met with special interest groups and she accepted money from them? Did she meet with special interest lobbyists that's paid her millions of dollars that would perhaps indicate some level of corruption? So there you go. I have shared with you where her income has come from. Now that concludes the 3D expression of who her avatar has come to be in this lifetime. And we are just in a moment going to be moving on to the energy read on her. However, before we do, I'm going to say, if you are new here, first and foremost, welcome. I am Faye. I am an energy reader, an intuitive, and I love to peel back that three-dimensional veil to explore what are the soul, spiritual, energetic, and vibrational elements that are comprising the world that we see around us. So if that sounds good to you, I invite you to subscribe. And if at any point you find you are enjoying this video, please do click that like button down below, because that really does help grow my channel, and that will in turn allow me to continue to create more incredible content like this for you. So let's now dive into some of the juicy goodness on an energetic level so we can come to understand who Tulsi Gabbard is behind the veil. So here we go. Tulsi Gabbard has a real sense of national pride. Now, I wouldn't quite say that she loves the United States in its current form, but she does want better for it. And more importantly than wanting better for the country itself, she wants better for us, as in all of the citizens of the United States. And to some extent, she also expects better from it. But Tulsi Gabbard is a very realistic and practical woman. So the reason she expects better from it isn't because she's some idealistic person who lives in Pollyannaville and has rose-colored glasses permanently affixed to her face, which is influencing the way in which she sees the world, which is like through the lens of like permanent, the glass is half full, worry not people, all will be well. No, because Tulsi Gabbard is not a stupid woman, nor is she simply idealistic. She is realistic as opposed to idealistic. She's practical too, but more so, she is also energetically deeply rooted to the United States. And because of how deeply rooted she is, which we're going to explore a little bit later on in this energy reading on her, But because of how deeply rooted in to the United States she is, she feels a real sense of connection to it. Therefore, she really wants the best for it. So in this regard, I would say she is akin to a mother who might be, for example, upset at her child. Just because one's children does something wrong doesn't mean we stop loving them. It just maybe means we want them to slow down and make better choices in the future. So look at it this way. The way she feels about the United States would be akin to the way she feels about one of her children who stole a cookie from the cookie jar. And the evidence lays all around that child. They were responsible for stealing the cookie. So Mama Tulsi is in another room and she hears a crash in the kitchen. So she goes into the kitchen and she sees her daughter standing there with a cookie in her hand, with a broken glass jar all around her and all of the cookies broken around her feet. So Mama Tulsi says to her daughter, "Did you steal the cookie from the cookie jar?" And her daughter says, "No, Mama." And Mama Tulsi says, "Did you break the cookie jar, even accidentally?" And her daughter says, "No, Mama," despite all of the evidence that lays around her. So Mama Tulsi would be upset at her daughter, maybe in fact due to the fact that her daughter was lying despite all of the evidence comprising the reality that she sees around her, more so than she would have been due to the fact that she took a cookie without permission and she broke the jar as well. That is very much the way that Mama Tulsi feels towards the United States and the current climate, and as well as the leaders, previous leaders that we have had, because she's looking at them just like she would look at her daughter. And despite all of the evidence around that is indicating they stole the cookie, they broke the jar, they're lying and they're saying, "No, Mama, I didn't do any of that." Does it mean that she doesn't love them? Does it mean that she doesn't love our country or she doesn't love the people? No. It just means that she wants better for it and she wants better for us. She frankly wants a better America. But it is not blind love based solely on the fact that she was born here and she is an American citizen. Because first and foremost, I don't even think she was born in American, like US soil, right? She was born like as a Samoan American, a Pacific Islander. But part of the reason she does love, and this is only part of it, because the big bulk of the energetic explanation for why she loves America and wants the best for us is going to come a little bit later on. But part of the reason that she loves it is because Tulsi Gabbard is an incredibly energetically grounded and balanced person, and that is going to be reflected in the location that she was born, which is in this case, the United States of America. So she is very energetically deeply rooted to the United States. Now, this is where I'm going to bring in something else, and this is really going to be for my astrology viewers and my astrology lovers. And it's not to say that if you don't follow astrology, you're not going to get something out of it. I assure you, you will. But especially more so if you understand astrology, it's just going to provide further explanation into the way in which Tulsi Gabbard shows up. So I'm going to say, imagine, if you will, that Tulsi Gabbard has a stellium of planets in Capricorn. And again, don't worry, I'm going to explain that what that means if you are not deeply enmeshed into astrology. Stellium of planets simply means you got a party, a stellium, a party in one particular location of a person's chart. And because there's a whole motherfucking party going on there, it just means that the energy in that particular location of their chart is going to be amplified. So imagine, if you will, she's got a stellium of planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn is also in her first house. Now, first house is all about our identity and how our avatar shows up in the world. So she's very, very, very grounded on an energetic level because of this. Now, perhaps you have also noticed, therefore, that the way that Tulsi Gabbard communicates is more direct, it's more to the point, and it is devoid of extra fluff, and it's devoid of extra charisma, in which everything she says sounds so flowery. We get really, really jazzed up when we're like, yeah, we're going to support this person. What the fuck did they say? I don't know. It all just sounds so good. That's not Tulsi Gabbard. So you might have noticed that first and foremost in the way that she speaks, right? Her voice itself is more of like a baritone. It's more rooted. It's a deeper tonality even in the voice that she has within itself. But then it's also direct, and it's to the point, and it's like facts over feelings. She's not going to make it sound all flowery and beautiful, so it evokes this sensation inside of us where we then overlook the facts because we're just driven by our feelings. She's the opposite. It's like, I'm going to speak to you honestly, I'm going to be direct, I'm going to be to the point, and I'm going to present to you all of the facts, and then you can base your feelings around the facts instead of vice versa. So she is, if you will, like the antidote to the very, very glib and superficial politicians we may have seen in part of our past. Now, I'm not going to call out all of them because we all could make our own interpretation into who we might consider to be very charming. But I think one arguably that we could make that claim about would be Bill Clinton. Right? He's like the first politician that went on TV, and he was like playing the saxophone. I think, wasn't he like wearing sunglasses? He was like a fucking vibe, right? And then everything he said was like, I mean, women like were ready to drop their fucking panties around him. So he would be an example of a more charming type politician. So she's like the polar opposite to that. And she's also the polar opposite to an example of, let's say, those politicians I had referenced that would be akin to like her daughter stealing the cookie from the cookie jar, where they're saying all of these beautiful melodic things coming out of their mouth about how much they care about the country and they love the country. And then it's like, look around the country and it's a fucking shit show. And it's like the words don't match what's actually going on here. So that's another indication to why she is so incredibly grounded. It's like facts over feelings, y'all. But then in addition to that, it's energetically being so grounded to the United States of America, and also energetically drawing this example. Now, I haven't even looked if she has a natal chart online. I don't know if there is one that is valid. I don't know if we even know that there's like a birth time. So this could be what the way her natal chart looks, but it's more to share with anybody that really understands the energy of astrology, to drive the point home in the way that her energy felt to me when I was actually connected to her and I was connected to it. So this is a woman that's very, very grounded. She's got a fucking party, a stellium of planets in Capricorn in her first house. So she is grounded, she is balanced, she is all about that hard work to get to the end goal. But in this case, the end goal is not necessarily to build her own financial profile. It's how can we work together? How can we build a better America? Now, this is in part why she is now doing some events with RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and I think it is called Rebuild the Republic. So these are two former Democrats, right, who first maybe went the way of becoming independents before they ultimately balanced into being aligned more with conservative values, because these are both people that are looking at the long-term health and wellness of the Republic of the United States. So she's very grounded. She's very attached to the earth here, and energetically, she's very, very, very grounded as well, and is not somebody that is afraid to take more on. Now, this is going to be exhibited by the fact that after, I think it was like after September 11th, she actually joined the US Army Reserves. Because it's like she's looking at the country and she's like, I can do something about this. So she did something about it because she's not afraid to take more on herself. Again, it's not about building financial wealth, although she has done so, but it's what level of bandwidth and capacity do I have inside of myself? And then to take more of it on. So that is only one half in building out the energetic profile into who Tulsi Gabbard is. Now, the other part of it is the fact that her energetic blueprint of why she is so deeply rooted here is because of her many, I think you get the idea, past lives that she has had here. And those were past lives in which she was incredibly connected to the literal earth and the literal ground of the United States of America. Now, if this is the first you're hearing about this and you're like, whoa, how the hell can you see all of her past lives? So this is because as an energy reader, I can first and foremost connect to something called the Akashic Records. Now, the Akashic Records is, if you will, imagine it's a book in a library, but it's not just one book based on this one life. Let's say we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard in this case. So it's not like there's just one book about Tulsi Gabbard and the name on it, instead of, as it says here on my notebook as notes, it says Tulsi Gabbard. But as an energy reader, I can connect to the Akashic Records, which is basically just like a library. And I can go to the section that says Tulsi Gabbard. And then once I get one book that is in one of her lifetimes, all of the other avatars and all of the other names and all of the other identities that she had in any of her previous incarnations are all in the same section. But in addition to that, also as an energy reader, because again, here's the thing, when I'm connecting to somebody's energy, is it like I'm literally going up to Tulsi Gabbard and I'm talking to her and she's sharing these things with me, or I'm getting to just like sit with her and like look into her energy and no. What I'm actually doing when I'm connecting to anybody's energy is I'm connecting to the highest expression of themselves. So it's not necessarily who she is in this one lifetime. It's the origin candle that lit the candle that became Tulsi Gabbard in this lifetime. So I'm connecting to that one original candle that has lit all of the other candles in all of her other lifetimes. So once I connect to that first original candle, I can see all of the other candles that have been lit. And what was shown to me while I was connected to Tulsi Gabbard's energy is so many fucking of her previous lifetimes were lives in which she was connected to the literal ground and the literal earth of the United States of America. And what was shown to me is so fucking wild. So I'm going to give you a brief overview and then I'm going to talk about all of them. So it was first shown to me that she had multiple lives as a Native American. She also had notable lifetimes during the Industrial Revolution. She had notable lifetimes as well in which she was alive and present during wars that have taken place on ground in the United States of America. So these are incredibly notable lifetimes that she had on the soil here in the United States. Now let's break all of this down. So she had multiple lives as a Native American. Also, in addition to that, she was a shaman and a Native American chief that was incredibly connected to the earth. The earth element, literal earth, literal soil. But in addition to that, she was also incredibly connected to the animals here and how mankind works in harmony and balance with the animals and with the earth. Now, she was also a Native American when the first so-called American settlers began to arrive here. Now, what are the first American settlers? This is when the United States of America was first starting to receive, because I can't really think of a better way to say it, we were starting to receive aliens, not like extraterrestrials, but we started to receive so-called aliens from another country. I think now the politically correct term would be considered like migrants. So after America was first discovered, or certainly discovered in 1492, and Americans, they weren't Americans at the time, they started to come here from other countries and they started to colonize it. So then they later went on to be considered the first American citizens or the first American colonizers. So she was here in many of her previous lifetimes where the first American settlers began to arrive here on American soil. And she saw how different they were. But it wasn't just that they were different in the way that they dressed, right? They were much more puritanical at that time. They were much more practical in their attire. They wore if you were a woman, you wore like a long frock and you wore like practical shoes. Ain't nobody like wearing motherfucking stilettos while they were like tilling the soil at that time, you know? They covered their hair with little bonnets. And like converse and contract that to the way that the Native Americans would dress. They had much less clothing on their body. Like if you were a man, maybe you were wearing like a loincloth. They were much more exposed to the elements because they were much more connected to the elements. So she was comparing and contrasting the way the Indian tribe they were in, I don't know if that's actually the correct term. I don't know if we're supposed to call the Native Americans, not the Indians. So she's comparing and contrasting the way her group of people were dressed in contrast to these so-called American settlers that were coming in. And they were so disconnected from nature because first and foremost, their body couldn't even like be exposed to it. They couldn't even feel it. But in addition to that, they were utterly disconnected to the land. And it was not just because of the fact that they were new here. So they had to learn different soils and they had to learn different like farming practices or farming techniques. They had to learn the different seasons and how to work with them. But it wasn't just because of all of that. But it was because these American settlers were completely disconnected to the soul and the spirit of the land. So whereas the Native Americans would look at the land and they felt connected to the soul and the spirit of it, they would observe how these American settlers were just looking at it and they're like, okay, we just have to learn how to till the land. We just have to learn when to plant certain things. But they weren't connected to it outside of it. And she had also observed at that time, in these lifetimes, that these American settlers didn't hear how the wind would sing through the trees and how the fish in the streams would move in harmony with the water. And how these American settlers could not commune with the owls in the trees, nor did they know how to call for rain when they needed it. So sometimes these American settlers would see these Native Americans, these people that were on the land before them, and they'd see them out there in a field, like making sounds and dancing in a circle, and they'd be like, not that they would say what the actual, that's like a modern day term, But they would look at them and they would be like, what the fuck is going? I'm not also sure if they would use that word. They didn't understand what they were doing because they were disconnected from the land. And they didn't understand that the reason the Native Americans were doing that was because they could commune with nature. So if they needed it to rain, they could get into a group, into a circle, and they could connect to nature and they could manifest the rain into their reality because they needed it at that time. So she would observe that the American settlers didn't see the animals as their spirit brothers, and they would not bless them for their contribution to their survival, but rather they would see them as literal pieces of meat, not as their spiritual brothers and sisters. And if you want to learn more about the contrast in the Native Americans and the first American settlers, I actually have done a video doing a deep dive into them in the past, which I have linked down below. And I definitely encourage you to go back and see it. It's very insightful, and it's actually one of my personal favorite previous videos of mine. But again, so she would observe how these American settlers would just look at meat and see it as a literal piece of meat, not understanding they were actually connected to it on a soul level. Similarly, she would observe how they would look at the land and her children, as in the Native Americans, and they would look at them as if they were wild beasts, meant to be tamed, and that the soul of her children, as in the Native Americans, were meant to be tamed with it. Let me tame this wild plot of land, not let me learn about this wild plot of land and come to understand why it is wild. And let me learn about these other people that were here before us instead of just looking at them and casting judgment on them. They're different than us. And she would also observe how the Americans would look at them, the Native Americans, the original keepers of the land, and they would view them as errant beasts in need of taming. So it's not just the land that needed to be tamed, it's these people too. And how the American settlers didn't really see the earth and the land at all, and didn't really take the time to learn about it, nor the keepers of the land. So it's not like they would extend an olive branch and be like, you've been here longer than us, you probably know how we can work with this land. It was more like, I don't know, it's like mom and dad went out of town and the kids ran wild, except mom and dad have never been here. We're now mom and dad because we just came here, and we're looking at the kids and it's like, they've run amok. We must rein them in. Instead of saying, hold the fuck on, they've been here first, maybe they can teach us something. Now, in addition to that, in many of Tulsi's other lives, it was shown to me that she was a slave living on a plantation who would work the land. Because what did the plantation owners have at that time? Large expanses of lands and large estates. So they would go to a trade market, a slave trade market, where they would purchase people and own them. And then therefore, I mean, if that's not casting some major breadcrumbs for the future, if you know, you know, but where they were literally considered to be owned. So that way these plantation owners could have their estates looked after and taken care of, but they could also have their land taken care of. So in some of these lives, she was a literal slave on plantations who would work the land. And it was shown to me that in some of these lifetimes, she was a man, shirtless, standing under the hot sun in blistering hot and humid conditions, and whose entire survival was connected to the land and the elements as well. Because if this slave would stop working, they would get whipped. And if they stopped being of use to the plantation owner, they would get put down like an old dog. So this slave would literally have to learn how to work with the soul and the spirit of the land, because their entire survival was connected to the soil and the land. And then also learning how to deal with the elements. It's hot, it's humid. How can I still get my work done without wearing myself out and wearing myself down? And how could they learn how to survive the weather conditions? And they would have to learn how to surrender to it and to not fight it. Now, so you have already two examples of Tulsi, or past lives of Tulsi, in which she had been deeply rooted to the land as both a slave and as well as a Native American. Now, what's interesting and notable about that is both of them in these lifetimes are deeply connected to the land, but in a totally different way. The Native Americans were born here and lived here prior to any of us. But as a slave in these lifetimes, the soul of Tulsi at that time, embodying somebody else's body, was actually brought over here. So they were the complete opposite of who she was as a Native American. So had to come here and had to learn how to work the soil, had to learn how to work the land, because their entire survival would depend on it. Stop being efficient, you would get whipped. Stop being useful, you would get put down like an old dog. Now, in addition to that, it was shown to me that Tulsi has had other lifetimes in which she was a soldier fighting for the United States independence and fighting for our country to be free from England. Wild. So literally being on the soil, being on the land here in the United States of America and fighting for the United States of America's right to exist independently. In addition to that, some more notable lifetimes. Tulsi had lifetimes during the American Industrial Revolution, where there was a large influx of buildings, new factories, new warehouses, and where resources were driven away from the land. Everything about Tulsi's past lifetimes is connected to the land of the United States of America. So there's all of these new buildings, factories, warehouses, where all of the resources are being driven away from the land. And in addition to that, driving workers away from the land too. So further severing and disconnecting man's connection to the actual land. Now, these workers had horrific working conditions. Sweatshops, factories, and warehouses in conditions with poor ventilation, not enough room, nor nearly enough windows for all of those workers who were just trying to survive. Sound familiar? They were just trying to survive while being so disconnected from nature and thus being disconnected from the divine. And Tulsi had observed during that time what would happen if a worker, due to these terrible working conditions, would find themselves unalived. And seeing how the management at that time there was a disconnect. They weren't looking at this as a person with a family and people who cared about them and people who loved them. They literally would see them as a cog in the system. And oh no, one of our cogs no longer works. So we just got to get a new cog. Like completely devoid of the ability to see this as a sentient human being. Similarly to the way the plantation owners didn't see the slaves as sentient human beings with families and lives of their own that missed them and loved them and cared about them, on a whole other motherfucking continent, and would just see them when a slave would break down due to the conditions in which they were working in as a cog in the system that failed to work. And then tying that to the way in which the first American settlers would look at the land like a cog in the system, and the Native Americans as cogs in the system too. So Tulsi Gabbard's lifetimes have all encompassed a complete devoid from humanity, human nature, soul, spiritual, divine, connection to the land. So on a soul level, Tulsi has bled with this land and has even perhaps bled in the land as a soldier that lost their life on this land, fighting for this land, as a slave who was whipped on this land, just trying to survive on the land. So on a soul level, she has bled on this land, mourned to be separated from it during the Industrial Revolution, fought for it, has seen it used and abused, and then disused, and saw how her people and all people were severed from it. So Tulsi Gabbard's roots and why she feels so connected and grounded to the literal earth here run very incredibly deep. And it is because of the lifetimes that her soul has incarnated on this land, worked in it, bled on it, was unalived on it, mourned it as well. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment a magnificent motherfucking tree in a wide expanse of a field. And there is one tree and one tree only in this field. And it's right in the center of it. There are no other trees in this field, only grass. So imagine, if you will, that all of the Earth's resources would be directed to this big, magnificent tree. Because there's no other trees competing for the resources to nourish it. Just grass in the field and this one tree. So all of the resources are being directed to that one tree. And thus then, therefore, how nourished and well fed with nutrients from the land this tree would be. And then also think about the fact that it's a big open field and there are not any other trees there, how deep the roots would grow down into the land and grow down into the soil. But now imagine, if you will, that this wide open field that this tree is in, it's not just land and it's not just soil, but it is in fact a sacred Native American burial ground. And that the souls of all of those bodies that are buried there are feeding the tree to help it grow and to infuse their life force energy and their love of the land that they lived on and that they were unalived on, infusing all of that into the roots to help that tree grow. And that all of the souls of those Native Americans that are buried there are infused into the roots and then thus therefore infused into the growth and expansion of the tree. But now I want you to imagine it's not just a sacred Native American burial ground, but in addition to that, there are also the bodies of slaves that are also there. And these are the slaves that fought for their survival on that land. And their experiences are also being fed into the soil that is feeding the tree. But now, in addition to that, it's not just a Native American sacred burial ground, and it's not just where, in addition to that, the slaves are buried, but it is also the burial ground of every worker who died, who was unalived in a factory or driven away from their connection to the land when the world had changed. And it's also the burial ground of all of the soldiers that fought on American soil for the United States' independence and for our ability to be a free and independent country from England. They're all buried on this land. All their souls are feeding the soil and feeding the tree. So imagine how deeply infused that tree would be with the history of all of those people. And now I want you to imagine that Tulsi is that tree. Because when I look, in fact, at Tulsi on an energetic level, I see an army of souls behind her. And she is the body that they no longer have. And she is the voice that they can no longer speak. And she is the message of the stories that those souls have longed to tell. So Tulsi Gabbard being rooted to this land is what gives her strength to fight for it. Because she's not just fighting for herself. She's fighting for all of the souls of those Native Americans, all of the slaves, all of the soldiers, all of those that lost their lives during the American Revolution, because that is the soil in which the tree grows from. As in, that is the army behind Tulsi that she is representing. So as imperfect as the United States of America, in fact, may be at this time, it's not just Tulsi that's fighting for it and fighting for her, as in Mother Earth. It's the souls of this motherfucking army that is behind her. Because she is the body that they no longer have. She is the voice that they can no longer speak. And she is the message of the stories they long to tell. So this is also another reason why when Tulsi Gabbard speaks, she speaks so matter of fact, direct, and to the point. Because the souls of all of these people are speaking through her, and she speaks for them. They want their motherfucking justice. They don't have time to be selling us some American dream. It's like, oh, hey, yo, we put our soul into this land. We learned it to survive it. We love this land. We lost our life on this land. We don't have to sell you a dream about this land. We're going to share the truth about it. So yes, when she speaks, they speak through her just as much as she speaks for them. So when she fights for us, for all of us to have a better life, it's for all Americans to have a better life. Now, this is not to say that she's not going to be in favor first and foremost. I don't even know why I feel I have to say this. There's always an Agent Smith, either mixed in now or in some future date, who's going to be like, oh, so she's against like immigration? No. She is all for immigration as long as it is done legally. What she is not against is anything that her soul has experienced in any previous lifetime. This is going to explain why she has transitioned from the left to the center and then over to the right. Because she's looking around and she's like, this feels familiar, even if it's not like a conscious thought in her mind. Why is she so against abortion now? Because she has seen the way in which lives were so disregarded. When she was working in a warehouse hundreds of years ago during the Industrial Revolution, and they were just a cog in the system. The way in which she was a slave that was taken from her land, taken from her people, taken from her family, and brought over here, not seen as a sentient human being, not seen as a soul, but again, seen as a cog in the system. So she looks around at the overproliferation of abortions and she's like, again, not on a conscious level, but it's like, this feels awfully familiar. And this is where people in modern day times are not seeing the souls as divine. They're just seeing them as an inconvenience. The way somebody that lost their life in the Industrial Revolution in a warehouse was seen as an inconvenience because it was going to slow down production for the day. And she is looking at the influx of all of these migrants or these illegal aliens. And she's like, this doesn't feel right. Because again, she was a slave that was just shuttled on in here and used and abused. Similarly to the way in which a lot of these, littler human beings of both genders are being shuttled in here and then they're going to be sold off for, I don't know if I can say the word, but trafficking. There's traffic on a school bus with little kids, but they ain't going to school. They're going to nefarious places. Because it harkens back to her own experience on a soul level in a past lifetime of being shuttled in here to be used and abused. So her soul has really come to grow into this position that she is in, because it's the souls of all of those other people that have lost their life behind her, infusing the roots of the tree that she has grown to be, standing tall and proud in a field. Because all of those people lost their lives, and far too soon. And they were robbed of their experience in the United States of America with their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. None of those slaves had motherfucking liberty. They were seen as literal possessions. The Native Americans were shoved into certain regions of the United States of America where they lived prior to the American settlers coming here. And now they just have their own reservations, right? So they were robbed of their connection to their land and as well as their own liberty. And all of these souls that are being shuttled in here, they're displacing the Americans that were born on this soil from our own pursuit of happiness. Because if our towns are being overrun and there's more crime and our jobs are being taken away from us, good the fuck luck being happy, observing all of these things going on. And all of those souls that are being unalived before they even have the chance of being born, well, they're just being deprived of their own life. And the life that could have or would have been. If not for the party that she used to belong to, not throwing shade, not throwing anybody under the bus, this is about Tulsi Gabbard's energy in seeing all of these things and being like, I remind you, she ran for president as a Democratic nominee just 4 years ago. And then through all of these things coming to pass, it harkened back to these soul experiences that she had inside of her, coming up to the fore. And that's why she has stepped over from the left to the central and now aligning herself more with conservative values, because those are the values that are feeding the souls of the army that stand behind her. Those are the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So from Tulsi Gabbard's point of view, maybe, just maybe, if we can get back to where we used to have been, it will tip the scales back and bring harmony back to the land and all the lives that were lost here and lost with it. So while Tulsi in the 3D material world is just one woman, with her energy, she's got a whole motherfucking army behind her that's also cheering her on. Because when I look at Tulsi Gabbard, that's what I see. I see the woman, how does the expression go? Behind every strong man is a stronger woman. Behind the strong woman that is Tulsi Gabbard is a whole motherfucking army with her and cheering her on. So that concludes the energy read on Tulsi Gabbard. I hope that you have enjoyed it, perhaps found it to be insightful or maybe even thought-provoking. I remind you to please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And this is also your reminder to stay in the high vibration until next time.